Yo, what's going on, y'all? Mike here, Sports and the Real Shit. For those who are new around here, I host a podcast called Sports and the Real Shit Podcast. But essentially what I've been doing the last several days is counting down the best players to have worn jerseys 30 through 1 in NFL history as we get closer to the NFL season starting in 2023. I've been having a good time. I hope you are as well. If you haven't seen the other episodes, check them out. Some really good ones. You'll be surprised that some of the best players wear some of the same numbers. It's crazy. So check that out. Also, check out the podcast, hang out, check it all out. But today we're down to number 5. And some pretty good competition for number 5. So let's check it out. First up is who I would call, I guess, Randall Cunningham 2.0, reincarnated, and that's Donovan McNabb. Donovan didn't have the build of Randall Cunningham, right? The long, skinny, all that stuff, right? He didn't have the long strides. But he was similar in play style, and he was part of the new wave along with guys like Steve McNair, new wave of quarterbacks who were dual threat, right? Who could run, who can throw. And Donovan McNabb's career ended up being underrated because he went to the NFC Championship like 4 straight times or something like that, right? And never went beyond that and onto the Super Bowl. He went to the Super Bowl, but never won a Super Bowl. And then it came out that at the end of the Super Bowl, Terrell Owens said he was throwing up and he wasn't ready to go win the game, all that stuff, right? All the stories came out. So as a result, he kind of goes down in history as kind of like, underrated and, wasn't really a winner type of thing. When really Donovan McNabb was really a winner, right? It just so happened that those years, for whatever reason, he didn't have the best team and they weren't able to get over the hump. But Donovan played 13 years, mostly in Philadelphia, and then towards the end he played in Washington, where Redskins fans, or whatever they are, and the Commanders fans will tell you he was kind of garbo, right? He was kind of garbage in those years, and Minnesota, right, at the very end. 37,276 yards for his career, 234 touchdowns, 117 picks, 29 rushing touchdowns, 6-time Pro Bowler. He was a Pro Bowler and second in MVP voting in his second year. People don't know that. In 2000, he threw 21 touchdowns and only 13 picks, 629 rushing yards, and 6 touchdowns. Again, we have to take these stats into context, right? These aren't the years where people are throwing 30, 40 touchdowns easily, right? But that's a pretty solid year for a second-year player. And on top of that, he was, again, like those Philly teams, they weren't like talent laden. They wasn't like, receivers and, this and that all over the place, right? I know Andy Reid was there, and he's a hell of a coach. Same thing he's doing with Pat Mahomes. But still in all, Donovan had a really, really good career carrying those teams to, 4 straight championship games, NFC Championship games, that Super Bowl that they almost won against the Pats, who, looking back, ended up being a dynasty, right? 2004 was probably his best year, where he had 3,875 yards, 31 touchdowns, 8 picks, 16 comebacks total for his career, and 24, game-winning drives. Like I said, dual threat guy, strong arm, carried those teams on his back. Like who was Donovan's best until T.O. got there? Who was Donovan's best wide receiver? Right? Didn't really have much. So I would say, his running back, Westbrook, was his running back? He was good. I think he was a Pro Bowler, but that was like really his primary weapon, right? They didn't have receivers stacked all over the place. T.O. ended up getting hurt in the playoffs, comes back for the Super Bowl. Who knows if he was fully healthy or not, right? Maybe they have a chip, to go with it after all that. But, they don't win, and stories come out, this and that. He gains weight, and now people view him as this overweight cat that played in Washington. When really all the years before that, he was balling out and really the biggest star in Philadelphia on the Eagles, carrying those teams, to success in the playoffs. So shout out to Donovan being one of the best number 5s in NFL history. Another guy who was pretty solid, Jeff Garcia, for a few years. Again, it's funny because the tie between Donovan and Jeff Garcia is Terrell Owens, and Terrell Owens bashed Jeff Garcia as well. But Jeff Garcia had some pretty solid years, played a total of 11 years. San Fran, that's what we know him mostly as, but also played in Philly, Tampa Bay, Cleveland, Detroit, became a journeyman. 25,537 yards, 161 touchdowns, 83 picks, 26 rushing touchdowns. He was a pretty good scrambler as well, for those who don't remember. Arm wasn't as strong as Donovan, but he was kind of a dual threat himself. In 2000, he threw for 4,278 yards, which is impressive. I didn't know that. Like, those are some serious stats. 31 touchdowns, 10 picks. 01, he backed it up with 35, 38, 32 touchdowns, and 12 picks. 4-time Pro Bowler. I didn't know this dude, Jeff Garcia, had those seasons like that. I knew he was good, but those are some really, really good seasons. 4-time Pro Bowler, like I said, 11 comeback, 17 game-winning drives. You know, him and T.O. connection was on point. But for whatever reason, they fell out. T.O. got the moniker of being a locker room cancer, right? You know, who knows what's true and what's not there. You know, in any relationship, there's two parties involved, so who knows what went down. That's not what I'm here to discuss. What I do know is that Jeff Garcia was a really solid quarterback for a few years, and then he kind of just, you know, disappeared and fell off the map. But that's neither here nor there. So one of the best number 5s ever, Jeff Garcia. Another one played much longer. Kerry Collins played 18 years. I remember Kerry Collins. I'm dating myself here. I remember Kerry Collins coming out of Penn State with Kejana Carter. Those teams were stacked with Joe Paterno. Played for Carolina, the Saints, the Giants. That's where he had his most success, probably the Giants. Oakland, Tennessee, and Indianapolis. 40,922 career passing yards, actually. 208 touchdowns, 196 picks. That was his thing. He had a strong arm and everything, but he threw quite a bit of picks. 2-time Pro Bowler. Led the league in interceptions 2 times. 5 times he had 3K, though. And 1 time he had 4K. A lot of cats can't say they've had 5K in the NFL. That's pretty good. 21 career comebacks, 30 game-winning drives. You guys remember, you know, the run they had with the Giants, went to the Super Bowl, and they got annihilated by the Ravens and Ray Lewis and them. But otherwise, you know, Kerry, you know, up and down career, had some success. Other years, not so much. He flashed some talent, but really kind of a mixed bag. You know, I would say mixed bag of mediocrity for Kerry Collins. But fortunately for him, he won that many good people wearing number 5. So he goes down as one of the best dudes to have worn number 5 in NFL history. Of course, as a reminder, this is according to me, and I wasn't watching football back in the 70s and early 80s, all right? I wasn't around. So anyway, shout out to Kerry Collins. I remember his passing form. He had a hitch in his throwing motion and everything. I mean, he could do some things now. He could do some things. So shout out to Kerry Collins. Joe Flacco, another number 5, who I would say was mediocre in his playing day. Probably kind of overrated to some people because he had a really solid winning percentage of playing on those Ravens teams who were reliant on their defense in the running game with Ray Rice and all that, right? But he won a lot of games, and people thought, you know, he was like so great and everything. A lot of people I followed on social media at the time thought Joe Flacco was like that. When really, you know, he got carried, all right? I'm going to be honest. He kind of got carried by his defense. I know that playoff run when they won the Super Bowl, he went berserk, right? But for the most part in his career, the winning season that they had, it's because he got carried. He had a few games, great games here and there, but you know he was what we would call your average, your mid quarterback. But Joe Flacco played 15 years across Baltimore, Jets, and Denver. Strong ass arm, I give him that. 42,320 yards for his career, 232 touchdowns, 147 picks. 6 times he had 20 touchdowns. He never cracked 30 touchdowns. 2014 was probably his best season with 3,986 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 12 picks. 7 times he had 3K, 19 comebacks, 25 game-winning drive, and he was a Super Bowl MVP of Super Bowl 37. Again, that year, that Super Bowl run was magical. Like, he did everything right that year for sure, and then he ended up cashing out, and then Ray retired, and then, you know, the rest kind of went downhill from there. But Joe was a solid quarterback, man. Again, up and down, mixed bag of mediocrity. Some games would be great, but some of the worst games you will ever see, right? If you look at QBR stat, QB rating stats, some of the worst statistical games in those categories, like Joe Flacco had them during his playing days. That's, again, because he was, you know, up and down, even with on a good team. That's the way it was. But, again, like Kerry Collins and the rest, lucky for him, there wasn't nobody else to really stick out with that number 5. There weren't too many. So Joe Flacco makes my list of the best number 5s to have played in NFL history. And then the last guy I'm throwing in here, it's not because he's truly known as the number 5. He's probably more known as the number 20. But number 20 was reserved for Barry Sanders, man. And I didn't want to, kind of overlook this cat. So I left him here for number 5. And that's my guy, Jalen Ramsey, out of Florida State. He plays for the Dolphins now. I love this guy's game. Loved him in college. Loved him since he's been in the league. He's not scared of anybody. In your face. One-on-one coverage guy. Shuts down a half of the field. But he wears number 5 now and not number 20, which is good. So I could talk about him here. Jalen's a great corner, man. Like, all that success that the Rams had, even Jacksonville that they had, like, he was a major part of that because, like I said, he played like the Dion role, as much as you can play the Dion role nowadays, where he could shut down half of the field. Like, I got you, I got this cat, you're not throwing to this cat. He was like that. And he rarely, got torched like that. Like I said, confident as heck, in your face, played, bump and run style, like man to man. He didn't care. He didn't need safety help over the top. He was like that. One of the best in the league. 8 years, Jacksonville Rams, and now Miami. 6-time Pro Bowler, 3-time All-Pro Super Bowl champ with the Rams. 19 picks, 1 TD. What can I say, man? Just one of those guys. His stats aren't going to really pop out at you because dudes ain't throwing to him like that. Same with Dion, right? A lot of cats are avoiding throwing to him, so he's not going to have a whole bunch of picks. But those who watch the game and understand football, the little bit that I do, know the impact that Jalen Ramsey has on the football game. And he is absolutely, although he's only worn 5 for a couple of years, one of the very best players to have worn number 5 in NFL history. I do want to say that. So, great cornerback. Keep it up for a couple more years. He's absolutely headed to the Hall of Fame. Hopefully, my Dolphins can afford him beyond this year to keep him around because we need great players, obviously, to win. But this guy, man, when he's locked in, sometimes he's not. I give him that. Sometimes he's not locked in. He gets bored. Jalen, sometimes he gets bored. But when he's locked in, he is like top of the top in terms of quarterbacks right now and in terms of cornerbacks in NFL history. One of the very best to do it. Number 20. Used to be number 20. Number 5. Shout out to Jalen Ramsey. So that was really all the contestants up for number 5. I would say, in my opinion, the best number 5 was Donovan, okay? Like I said, he was part of the revolution of running, of dual-threat quarterbacks. People back in those days were still hesitant of cats who ran a lot. They thought they would get hurt a lot. Donovan, he wasn't really one of those guys who was hurt a lot, unlike Michael Vick, right, who was frail and got concussions. Donovan was pretty sturdy. He was thick, big boned. But, dude, Donovan in his day was a monster, strong arm. And I think, to me, he was the best number 5 to have played in NFL history in the time I've been watching the NFL. So, shout out to Donovan. You take the crown for all the number 5s. So, I'm going to leave it there, y'all. Appreciate y'all hopping on again. We'll catch you guys at number 4. Almost there. Season's almost starting. Catch you guys next time. Mike, Sports on the Real. Peace.